Hi, happy Veterans Day. So before I get into today's story, I definitely want to say thank you to all who have served in all branches of the military. And I am so appreciative of being part of that family. And there's such a great camaraderie with both veterans and active duty military, and something that I truly appreciate on a day like Veterans Day. So thank you for your service if you're a veteran. And if you're not, definitely make sure, if you know somebody, thank them, because it's absolutely one of those things. It's funny, it's just as a veteran, we kind of go through that process of how we feel about people thanking us for our service, and I will just definitely say I always appreciate it when it's a genuine thank you, not automatic. So always a good thing. So today's kind of a tough one. This is one of those, get real, gritty stories, maybe a little long, but I think it is valuable content. I also have lots of new followers, and so I think it's important to revisit certain aspects of my story that I don't tell all the time, because they're very important to who I am. They're very important to how I serve you and serve my clients. And there's always such great power in these stories and learning opportunities for you as well. So I'll start with, I always say I am the empowered overthinker. And the reason I say that I am the empowered overthinker is I've always been, to some degree, an overthinker. However, having suffered from post-traumatic stress for such a long time, I feel like that is the pinnacle, the height of overthinking and being stuck in your head. It really is post-traumatic stress. I mean, this is, the depression, the anxiety, and the trauma all in one. So everything is very stuck in your head. So to go from a place of being that crippled in my life as I was, which I'll get into as I talk about the story, to now being as empowered as I am to say, yeah, you know what, I'm an overthinker, but I'm not stuck there. I'm not crippled there. I have this great toolkit now that I use to really show up differently, and who I'm being is so different, and that's just an amazing thing, and it's very empowered. So the funniest thing is I joined the Army before 9/11. This was not one of those things like 9/11 happened, there's that huge flood of people joining the military. 9/11 actually happened after I finished a basic training and, AIT, which is where you learn your job. And I was home on leave. 9/11 happened, and immediately we started getting deployed. So we deployed to the Pentagon to clean up the anthrax, since I did chemical and biological warfare detection. And then later in 2003, I deployed to Kuwait, where we were on the front lines when we invaded Iraq. And so we were very busy during the 3 years that I was in. Now, I originally enlisted for 4 years, but I got hurt during my tour of duty in Iraq, and so I was medically discharged when I got out. What's interesting, as a lot of people who deployed to the Middle East, Afghanistan, Uzbekistan, Kuwait, Qatar, Iraq, lots of people, including myself, suffered from a variety of traumatic experiences. And it affects everyone different in terms of what they went through. Like, everybody went through different details. But in terms of the symptoms, almost everybody I've run into ends up really expressing the similar symptoms. We just, a different variety or different degrees of severity and how shut down we become in that post-traumatic stress experience. Thanks, Chris. You're welcome. Hi, Joy. Thanks for joining. When let's see, where was I at? Oh yeah, post-traumatic stress. So like I said, this is the consummate level of overthinking. You are stuck in your head. And oh, you're very welcome, Joy. I appreciate the appreciation. So you're very welcome. I got back in 2003 from Iraq, and now because I was on the front lines, I was in there that first 6 months we were there, I experienced not only combat-related traumas, but also what the VA and military kind of politely refer to as military sexual trauma. So it's like, let's give it a pretty non-offensive name. It's just weird. So there's a variety of traumas that happen over the course of the time that I'm in the military. Like, it's a variety of stuff. I come back from Iraq, immediately Jeff's like, you're different. And over the course of the next 10 years, I was in and out of therapy or the psychiatrist's office on tons of meds, and I had no idea what was wrong. I just knew I was not managing at all. Pretty much from the time I got back, I was not managing in the least bit. And over the next 10 years, it was a slow decline in my health, my physical, emotional, and spiritual health, to the point where in 2013, I was so sick I couldn't work anymore. I was 100 pounds overweight. I was suffering with tons of chronic illness, and the post-traumatic stress symptoms were just out of control. So in this space, I was not managing. I was not coping in the least bit. I had no idea how to handle what was going on in that overthinker space. You know, it was the depression, the anxiety, and so I would numb out. I would avoid my emotions. I would avoid myself. So I was a workaholic, and I was an alcoholic, and then I was on lots of medication, or I would dabble in recreational drugs. And I was a huge self-medicator with food because, again, it's stuffing my emotions. You know, stuff it with food, stuff it with alcohol, stuff it with drugs or meds, stuff it with whatever. And I remember around my rock bottom time, anything I could do to just change who I was being in that moment, to just distract me from my emotions, it was just, anything was helpful. And I remember at the worst, I was even engaging in self-harm because at least physical pain was a distraction from, you know, the emotional pain that I was going through. And I am not in any way unique compared to other people who've had any type of trauma in their lives. But not long after that time, I had my little wake up moment that I was like, this is not my life. I was so far away from a connection with myself, who I was being, you know, authentic me, that I stopped trying to control anything else in my life other than myself. And that started my rebuilding process to get to where I'm at now in this empowered overthinker space. What's interesting, I think, one of the most interesting things was how the symptoms started quickly subsiding just by focusing on what I had control over. So much of trauma is really feeling out of control because we had these things outside that happened to us, you know, where we were some type of a powerless space. And so there's a bit of a victim perspective. And just by focusing on what I had control over and taking control of me, it just shifted everything. Now, what was interesting in this recovery process was I learned some powerful things, not only about myself, but I think about a lot of veterans and military who struggle with post-traumatic stress. As I started the healing process and working through military-related traumas, guess what welled up to fill that space? After I process and work through that stuff, it's old childhood traumas. And so I joined the military already with poor coping. I'd already had childhood traumas that I brought with me. I already brought poor coping with me to the military. So that's what primed me to be in the space of having post-traumatic stress. You know, we don't just show up and have post-traumatic stress. You know, it's not one person can experience the same trauma as somebody else, but again, what is that history they're bringing to the table? What are the coping, relationship to self, all of that stuff they're bringing to the table to begin with? So if you think, hey kitty, she sees I'm getting emotional, so she's coming to be a support animal. At least she's not like a support squirrel or something kooky. Yes. Not that I'm judging. Totally awesome. So many of my fellow military members and so many of my fellow veterans, when we join the military, we come from, you know, poor, lower middle class situations. Not everybody, but, you know, and I am kind of generalizing a little. But we come from trauma, instability, imbalance, you know, family patterns that are unhealthy that we're working to get away from when we join the military. And so a lot of us show up to the military, show up to service already pre-programmed with some poor coping skills. And so you add in these situations, these highly intense, highly traumatic situations like you're exposed to, not only in the military, but I do want to also include my first responders here. I've got a brother who's a cop, parents who are cops, another brother who's a paramedic. I mean, the first responders deal with this too. So we show up, you know, to be like in these service industries, you know, civil service, military, things like that. But we've got poor coping. We are not great at self-managing. And so that's why the alcoholism and the workaholism and the numbing out, you know, binging on TV and numbing out with food and all those unhealthy coping is what we end up gravitating to. So the moral of the story thus far is that I was pre-programmed to not manage long before I joined the Army. I showed up that way. And so in this recovery journey, this was reprogramming way older stuff than just my time in the Army, you know, like way older stuff, you know, the childhood traumas. Everything that I do now is so much more in alignment with living my purpose, which is just to, you know, show up as real and as authentically as possible and help others change their lives too. And it's by no means perfect. I am not perfect. It is always a work in progress. But because I'm showing up so real and so authentically, like in this storytelling session with you today, I know the value of sharing these things with you. So, you know, it's so much better than where I was. And that's all the tools that I share with you, whether it's in, you know, the free quick get out of your head quick guide, whether it's in these, you know, videos that I share with you all the time. All of these different tools and techniques that I share, I promise you they work because it's gotten me to this place right now. And that's huge. Releasing the trauma has really been about moving out of that victim perspective where it's responding and reacting to all of these external variables and focusing on, you know, connecting to myself, building that relationship, believing in my enoughness, right? Because we're always so functioning from that scarcity of being not enough, right? Not enough. That's why when I finish these videos with you all the time, I always remind you, you are enough, because it's so important. Whether you're releasing trauma, whether you're releasing fear, whether you're releasing limiting beliefs, it's all tied together. All tied together. Even if you didn't experience trauma has such a broad spectrum. If it's created some fear and limiting beliefs that are stopping you from pushing outside of your comfort zone, The solution is connecting to yourself. It's not about any of the external stuff. It's all the internal work. The internal work is in building that relationship with yourself is what will fix all the other stuff around you. All of those external things, they're just symptoms of what's going on in here, what that relationship is with yourself. By changing how you're thinking, by changing who you are being, by learning to love yourself first, because that sets the example for everybody else to love you and to be able to love others, that lays that groundwork of working past all that old junk, all that stuff. Oh, thank you so much, Krista, for, yeah, exactly, right? That is amazing. So that is exactly what we need. We need family connections or positive support systems, whether it's groups or other victims, as long as it's an empowering space. Because, I've done some of those groups and everybody just wants to like wallow in the old junk. And I'm like, no, I am about creating change so that I can help others, not just constantly focus on what's wrong and what's not working. So it is possible. Wherever you are at in your journey, whether you're working to get around trauma, fear, limiting beliefs, even just pushing outside of your comfort zone because you want to create change in your life, in your relationships, your health. And the craziest thing was, as an entrepreneur, no matter how much they warn you that it's going to push you outside of your comfort zone, nothing prepares you for the amount of inner work that has to happen to grow a business, to be an entrepreneur, to be a service provider when you are the service. Oh yeah, that's just nuts. I mean, nuts. There's just no prepping someone for that. No matter how much you think you're prepared, yeah, that doesn't happen. Shift your focus to that connection with yourself and those key important people. Obviously, it's going to be, if a spiritual connection is important to you, start with your spiritual wellness. Learning to love yourself is huge. Having a connection, a network of positive, supportive people, very important. But letting go of control of things you don't have control over is huge. And that is a great place to start. If any of what I talked about, today is resonating with you, important for you, and you're like, oh my gosh, that's totally it. I am ready for change. There's a link right above this to book a free consultation. Just a free chat on the phone, 45 minutes, strategy session. See where you're at. If you know you want some change, but you're not sure where to start, I am happy to help you. No pressure, no sales. We're just going to connect to what your needs are, and I can make recommendations on resources. Some of those resources are free, so, no loss whatsoever, and there's great value in this time. So I hope you've enjoyed this story. This was definitely emotional. It took a bit for me to show up here and do this, even though I felt called. It's just divine purpose, right? I totally knew. I think last night I needed to do this video today, and that doesn't mean it was any less scary to get this real and this vulnerable with you today. So I am excited to hear what resonated the most for you. And remember, as always, you are enough. And I am enough. And we'll talk again soon. Bye.